Okay. Go. Re-sharing the screen. Okay. Aha. So in this presentation today, we'll be covering the stellium in Scorpio, which includes the new moon in Scorpio, which will technically be happening on Tuesday. So this is a preview for this upcoming week. We will do a couple of settling exercises, somatic exercises for moving toward well-being, noticing what's happening in the body. Yeah, reorienting to slowing down and to resources that we all have within us. There will be a short break. And because this is a small group, at the end of each section, if you have questions, we can pause for a few minutes and you can raise your hand electronically. Does everybody know how to do that? So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a reactions button. But anyway, so we can cross that bridge when we get there, and if it's just for a few participants. Oh, let's see. Okay, there's another one. Yeah, so we'll have a short break. We're going to talk about Mars and Gemini because that's going on right now. Mars retrograde and Mars square Neptune. And then there's a few announcements about trauma-informed astrology courses coming up next year. And then, yeah, more questions and answers at the end. Okay, so that's this presentation for the next hour and a half or so. There we go. So the first exercise we're going to do is called 3 by 3 by 3. So can I get everybody to mute themselves? That would be really helpful. Thank you. And yeah, so let's start with 3 mindful breaths, just noticing your breath today. And for 3 by 3 by 3, the first thing we're going to do is just look around the space that you're in right now. So turning your head a little bit to the left, taking in what's in your environment right now. And when you're ready, see what your eyes are drawn to. Is there a texture? Is there a color your eyes are really drawn to today? Maybe it's an object, maybe it's a plant, maybe it's an animal, maybe it's a pet. Just notice what your eyes are drawn to. And the first 3 that we're going to be working with is, as you look around the space you're in, name 3 external objects. So it might be a book, it might be a piece of furniture, it might be a painting, it might be a tree you see out the window. So 3 external objects. Just name 3 objects that you see as you look around the room, and you can stay muted. So the first three is external. So we're looking out, we're bringing our awareness out into the space around us. And then for the next three, the middle three, we're going to go within just for 30 seconds or so. So now I want you to notice what's happening in your body. So now we want to name three or be aware of three emotions and or sensations that are happening inside. So mine might be, I feel my sits bones on the chair from the inside. So it's like I'm orienting to gravity from the inside of my body. I can feel gravity pulling on my guts, my viscera, my skeleton. Yeah, and then I'm excited about being here. I'm excited about leading this new moon workshop today. And the heat is a little bit low, so it's cool in here. So I'm feeling that sensation of coolness. And so your three might be three sensations, might be three emotions, might be one emotion, two sensations, etc. And then the last three, we come back out. So we're bringing our awareness external again. So noticing the space around you. If there is a window, if you can bring your focus to look outside, change your focus to be a little bit more distant, that can be helpful to counter looking at the screen, for an hour straight. And this time, I want you to name three new objects in the space around you. So looking around, naming three different objects than you named earlier. So for me, that might be this lamp, this painting, and this chair over here. And so some of the benefits of doing 3 by 3 by 3, over time, we can start to reset our stress response with this exercise. It seems very easy, and that's on purpose, right? We want it to be simple. We want it to be comfortable. And so when we have our awareness external, we're looking around, we're taking in our environment and making sure that it's pretty safe here, hopefully. And then when we go internally, if I encounter any challenging emotions or sensations, sometimes the mind can get stuck there, right? If I have a little pain in my, my knee, for instance, oh gosh, what's that about? I need to figure that out, right? And so the mind can get a little bit obsessed with internal things. And that's why we come back out for the third set. We're naming external objects again. And so if you do this every day, if you want to, you can start to recondition, to repattern your nervous system to, instead of going within and always getting stuck on something, can I come back out and look around again and notice that, oh, you know what, here and now I'm pretty safe. Any questions? We're still a small group, so if you want to unmute and ask a question, feel free. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Susan?
Yeah, I think we talked last night. There was another really loud party in the neighborhood, and I was successful in getting a team of neighbors to call dispatch. And I also had an ant swarmer invasion right behind me coming up from my baseboard on this wall a few nights ago. So didn't sleep that night either.
Oof.
And I'm
Yeah.
also dealing with a subterranean termite issue.
Yeah.
So I'm not feeling safe in this space. And I have found that I'm not able to do the repatterning. Like I've been aware of this basic idea of how to attend,
Uh-huh.
but I'm finding that I really just want to be out of my body. Like I feel like I'm white knuckling it, like I'm on a roller coaster ride that I can't get off of. Nothing feels safe. My cat, you know, feeling her purr is very settling.
Yeah. So take that in, noticing that.
Mm.
Yeah. And inviting her onto your lap, maybe.
Yeah, basically, you're just anything. Try to find a resource anywhere
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes it's hard, right? Life throws us a lot of curveballs. And so yeah, a resource can be as simple as, I love those paint strokes in that painting here, even though my body might be in pain or I've got these external stressors all around me. Um, yeah, yeah. And so here we are talking about Scorpio, so going deep. So in a few minutes, we'll talk more about that. Um, yeah, so we are going to do 3 exercises total today. So I would encourage you to, if one in particular feels comfortable, feels good, feels enjoyable, stick with that one, right? So we just did one. We just did 3 by 3 by 3. And we're going to do a total of 3. And so, by the end of this, hopefully one of those exercises will feel good, or at least feel better for you. Yeah, okay. So we'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So this is the new moon chart for Tuesday. So as I mentioned, the moon, we're doing this presentation a little bit early, so a couple days early. And also, this is the chart for the East Coast of the US. So if you're in a different time zone, your chart would look a little bit different. But what's important here is the planets. So these planets are all going to be pretty much in the same location in each sign when the new moon happens on Tuesday. So don't worry about the orientation of the whole chart. I'm just pointing out here that on Tuesday, we're going to have the sun and the moon and Venus and the South Node in Scorpio here. And then, so later on in this presentation, we'll talk about Mars in Gemini. So that's here at 25 degrees. And then that's about to go retrograde. In about a week, it's going to turn retrograde. And it's also squaring Neptune here in Pisces. So, in an hour and a half or so today, we can talk about those things. And then, yeah, so we'll be pausing a little bit at the end of each section to see if there's questions. All right, so Scorpio energy in general. So here we go. So Scorpio is, it's the sign of the depths. It's the sign that has to do with deep transformation. And it's also has a lot to do with growth, maturity, improving ourselves, evolving as becoming better human beings. And so Scorpio has a lot of potential for growth. So it's a very dynamic sign. And so let me just skip ahead to a couple. I think I've got the symbols here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Scorpio is the only sign that has, okay, so there's one person who wants to come in. Scorpio is the only sign that has, okay, let's go back. 5 symbols, right? Okay, so most people know about Scorpio as the Scorpion, right? So that's here. And that's the lowest frequency of Scorpio. And then Scorpio is a fixed sign. And so that means it's also a serpent sign. So hence the bottom right corner, the snake here. And then the middle frequency of Scorpio is the eagle. So the Scorpio eagle is in the mix. And then down here on the left, this is supposed to be a phoenix. It's a very, well, the whole picture, it looks better with the whole phoenix. But so the phoenix, which rises from the ashes and is reborn, right? So the Scorpio phoenix is much higher frequency. And then finally, the Scorpio dove or the Scorpio lamb, those people are very rare. That's a really super high frequency of Scorpio. But here's the catch. We all have Scorpio in our charts somewhere, right? We might not have planets in Scorpio, but we all have planets in Scorpio, or we all have the sign of Scorpio in our charts somewhere, right? So at some point in our growth, in our process, we are going through some of these phases, right? So the lowest frequency of Scorpio, the Scorpion, is very mixed up in its unconscious, right? There might be some chaos or some discord. Things are disordered. There might be a lot of inner conflicts at the lower frequencies of Scorpio. And so Scorpio has to do with big energy. It has to do with death, sexuality, rebirth, loss, big emotions, and sometimes big emotions can be destructive. And so Scorpio is working with all of these things. As we start to encounter teachers or learning opportunities, growth opportunities, then we start to make some of that unconscious chaos more ordered, right? We can grow, we can mature, and that's why Scorpio has the most to do with transformation. So Scorpio is also associated with rites of passage. So can I really acknowledge, like, wow, last year was a really tough year. Can I give myself some time to process that, to integrate that? Maybe do some journaling about what did I learn? What lessons did I learn from that time? What can I take with me going forward, right? And then you come to the Scorpio serpent. So things are a little bit more conscious there, but if there's a lot of self-oriented drives, motivation, self-oriented attitudes, energy, then these lower frequencies of Scorpio give the sign its bad name, if it has one, right? Not to say, I mean, I love Scorpio myself personally, but it's when we do the work that it can really shine and bloom and blossom. And so a part of that growth process has to do with encountering and facing our mortality. And so when that starts to happen, then there's more awareness, like, I need to do something good with my life. I need to have a purpose, do something meaningful, maybe experiment with some service and altruism. And at that point, you move into like the Scorpio eagle phase, the Scorpio phoenix phase. So the Scorpio eagle, the eagle is the animal, it's the creature that flies closest to the sun, right? And so the sun is a lot more than just this great light. The sun represents source. The sun represents the divine spark. And so it's our spirit, it's our highest self. And so the eagle is moving in that direction. And so then we really open up and we start seeing the big picture, because of course eagles can see like 30 miles and their vision's incredible. Then we can start to process these deep feelings, and we can discover previously unknown resources, and therefore experience a rebirth or multiple rebirths over time. Along with these big emotions often comes a processing of early primal stuff. So maybe pre-verbal times. And so do we have support? Do we have a good mentor, a therapist, a teacher, a spiritual teacher that we can lean into to help us work with these early instinctual emotions? And then if we do that work, then we can get in touch with profound vitality, increased capacity to be with emotions and to be with many different types of emotions. And then we can even move into being with the positive emotions. So we really have to process some of the grittier stuff to truly get in touch with the joy, the happiness, the excitement, the contentment. So Scorpio has to do with death, as I mentioned, and it also has to do with big experiences. So Scorpio does appreciate peak experiences. So Scorpio likes to go big. It can be a little extreme, and Scorpio is also aware of things that are beyond death. And so in Scorpio, that's where we have the underworld journey, right? So there's a shamanic shadow dancing, as it were, where we get in touch with, or we can start to see through the veils. So that's, so in Scorpio, you start talking about the soul. People are working with guides or angels or wisdom beings, wisdom company, ascended masters, if that's what they want to do. And we become aware of the subtle energy body inside of us. So yeah, let's go back to the previous couple of slides. Okay. Yeah, so here we are in the Scorpio time of year. And so this is a good time for asking what do we want to let go of? What do we want to release? But also, what do I need to put into place to accomplish my goals, to accomplish my dreams, right? So the new moon is coming up in 2 days. So this is a great time to be intentional. And you might even spend the next day or two asking, what needs to die within me so that I can truly live, right? So I'm just going to give a little bit of time to let that sink in. What needs to transform within me so that I can move forward? I can move in a healthy direction. And one question I like to ask my clients is, do we want to choose to simply be less miserable? Or do we want to truly move towards well-being, vitality, and aliveness, right? There are many ways that we distract ourselves. There's many ways of treating symptoms, over-the-counter medications, herbal supplements, eating a lot of delicious food, substance abuse. There's a lot of ways we distract ourselves from the deeper work, right? But Scorpio is really asking us, what wants to transform, what wants to pass away to allow this beautiful rebirth. And Scorpio in general wants to be fed, wants to be nourished, wants to be seen, wants to be embraced, right? So how can we move in that direction? And as we talk about working with the veils and feeling through the veils, seeing through the veils, then we're also talking about reconnecting to source. So ultimately, this is what Scorpio wants, right? We want to be held in that primordial womb, right? We want to be held in clear light, ultimate safety, ultimate compassion, and that's infused with wisdom, right? And so all of the energies of Scorpio, whether it's the big challenging emotions like jealousy or envy or resentment, if you go deep enough, it all comes back to wanting to come back to source, right? So the beauty of Scorpio is that we can make these transformations, right? We can go through these phases of life. We can hopefully we can work with a good practitioner, a good therapist, a good body worker, and work through these feelings of vulnerability or whatever is leading to those big challenging emotions. It can take time, but it can be a really beautiful transformation. Scorpio desires to feel things intensely and thoroughly. So Scorpio loves to research, do detective work, to really get to the bottom of things. And so therefore, if you know some Scorpios, if you have some friends who are Scorpios or who are Scorpionic, right? Maybe they have a lot of Pluto in their chart or have a lot of eighth house in their chart. We can respect that process, right? So Scorpio can sometimes go through a dark night of the soul, right? And hopefully, you know, we can support those people. You know, we want them to have support going through that process. But if they have that intensity, if they have that desire to penetrate to the bottom of things, we can respect that, right? Because that's a part of what Scorpio is. And then on the other side of that journey, when we come out the other side of the dark night, then we have stable inner security. We can have better acceptance, and we can have more trust in life. And then we start leaning into more compassion and deeper understanding. And that compassion, it has to be said, has to start with ourselves, right? So more compassion for ourselves, deeper understanding and acceptance of ourselves. Yeah, and so when Scorpios go through this powerful journey, then they become really incredible healers, because they can guide others through the process. That, you know, we can say, you know, I went through something similar, right? Or I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I could tell you a tiny bit about my process if you want. And it was pretty hard. And so the Scorpio types can potentially become some of the best healers really on the planet. Yeah. So we can pause for a second here. I've gone into some pretty deep, powerful stuff. Any questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Hi, Wanda. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Hi guys. Yesterday was my birthday and it was the worst day ever. And I still can't stop crying.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with a lot of hurt, pain, and anger.
Uh-huh.
I treat that people, I don't care who they are, what color they are.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I mean, if they need my help, I'm there and I don't look for nothing. But
Uh-huh.
at this point, I'm like, when is it going to happen for me? I'm in a relationship. He just got out the military. He talking about he want to pick up where we left off, but I don't see any emotional or physical stability.
Uh-huh.
But he don't want me to go nowhere. He said he wants to pick up where we left off, but now he's out. I don't know what challenges he's got. And I told him in a relationship, because I don't like a liar. I don't
Right.
care how much it hurts.
Right.
Um,
Well, so first of all, can we just pause with that much? You've shared a lot of big stuff, right? So my heart is really going out to you right now, right? So let's just pause. Can we notice our breath for a second? Yeah, I mean, so that's hard. I mean, you're describing some really big, challenging stuff. So let's, can we allow the nervous system to take a moment and just be with this much, right? This huge, really huge. Yeah, and so correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm hearing you say is you want more stability. You want more like healthy emotional process and expression in your life,
yes.
right? Yeah. So leaning into support, who can you go to
Well,
talk to, or even, friends, family,
I'm supposed to start therapy. I'm on Zoom. I haven't set up an appointment because I don't know.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I can't find nobody that I can relate to, put it that way.
Yeah. So that's hard. Yeah, I mean, I feel that too. And so the big thing is moving towards safety, right? We have to have some safety before we can experiment with trust, right? If there's no safety, there's no trust.
Yep,
We have to have some safety before we can experience joy.
yep,
We have to have safety before we can experience playfulness and
yep.
a sense of humor. And so if you don't feel safe with your partner, or I'm not sure if he's an ex, really first and foremost, move towards safety. And I know that's easier said than done, right? I mean, and some of us have really challenging situations, but there hopefully there's some community resources you can reach out to. So I mean, here in Virginia, we have a group called Region 10, but that's just
I used to live in I used to live in Virginia.
oh, okay.
I, I will never go back to that state.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Ever.
yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, sure. There's a lot of goods and bads, no matter where you are. But
I know.
but yeah, so hopefully hopefully you can find a good fit for a counselor, a therapist, mentor, someone you can confide in and feel safe confiding in, right? That's important.
I've been trying to find a life coach or a
Yeah,
spiritual guide because I'm
yeah,
a good person and I deserve to be happy.
right. That's a basic human right, and you deserve that. Exactly. Yeah, I think you're saying that just right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing, Wanda, and yeah, let us know if you have other questions about this material, and of course, wishing you well through this challenging time.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else questions on Scorpio New Moon, which we're going to get to a little bit more of that here in a second. Questions on the material so far?
Kirby, I wanted to mention something in reference to Scorpio. I believe it began in May, a progressed sun in Scorpio for what I think is the first time. I'm not clear on whether it previously. And I felt it immediately. There was such a shift in me.
Uh-huh.
There was something very different. and it's taken a bit. I'm just about at this point now where I can allow for this shift without being really upset about that Scorpio thing in my life. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that I am now, I have a very strong Pluto with my Leo sun, and I've very much enjoyed the power of those two energies with the Pluto conjunct and the wonderful Leo happy phase. And now what the idea that I had to go through this when the biggest thing that I felt was the positivity of the sun, and now, but I'm getting there. It's happening. So I just wanted to add that I am now a Scorpio baby.
Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, so the progressed sun is a little bit different. We're talking about the sun that goes, the transiting sun, it moves approximately 1 degree per day. And so the new moon is associated with the transiting sun, of course. Yeah, in general, the progressed planets, when there's a shift like that, whether it's changing into a new sign or a new house, I mean, depending on your connection to it, you mentioned you have an aspect between Pluto and your sun natally, and so you might be a little bit more attuned to Pluto and Scorpio, right? And so, yeah, for a lot of people, it can take a year or two, sometimes even 3 years to feel those shifts from when a progressed planet shifts into a new sign or a new house. Oftentimes it takes a little, at least 6 months to like, wow, things have changed, a lot in the last 6 to 12 months. But it's slow and gradual, right? Because that's the progressed chart. It's a very slow, gradual evolution, as it were. But yeah, so how can we become friends with Scorpio?
Well, I think one of the things that's helpful is to realize that all the time you were, like, say, me, debunking Scorpio and all of its madness, now here you are, and you're going to have to eat everything you just said about Scorpio. So get rid of that idea. And once I started letting go of the less than wonderful thoughts about having to go through the dark veil of things, then I began to see the light that is Scorpio. And that just came in recently, like in the past couple of weeks, and I could see myself happy in a way that I hadn't been as it was moving. So I think the idea is to give Scorpio its due, and maybe it won't feel quite so frightening to people.
Yeah. Scorpio does not mean automatic challenge. It doesn't mean automatic bad stuff, right? Really, it's Scorpio is an outlet. Scorpio allows us to bring what is hidden to the surface. Scorpio allows us to refine and purify this marsh water under the surface, right? So what has been hidden, so we don't want to do too much at once, right? So we really need to honor our nervous system's capacity, and what can I handle today or this week or this month, right? And try to just take it one piece at a time. If I try to make 6 big changes at once, nothing's going to stick. And so be gentle, be kind throughout the process, right? And yes, Scorpio is a powerful sign. Yes, it's the mystery sign. Yes, it's kind of the sign that has to do with death, but it's not like, oh, Scorpio is happening, so there's a chance I might physically die. But it's more like this metaphorical death. What needs to go so I can feel more alive today? And it can be a conflict between the higher self and the lower self. So you might be feeling some of that. And then
Kirby.
hopefully,
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, hopefully compassion, altruism, kindness, and acceptance can win out, right? Because
Yeah.
the progress sun in Scorpio means you've got 29 years probably to work with that. So lots of time, lots of time, lots of time.
29 years, oh Lord.
That's why the natal planets are so much more important, because they're the baseline. So that's what we work with primarily.
Yeah.
I need to ask you a question real quick.
Okay,
Not to get
okay.
off subject. Okay, like I said, yesterday was my birthday, and some astrological say that I'm a Scorpio, and some say I'm a Libra. So,
Oh, you are right on the cusp. Yeah, I mean, so if I just peek right now, I'm going to just grab my phone and peek, because I think the sun is technically in Scorpio like right now, like as of like this moment.
I
But
keep getting messages that things
just
are getting ready
turned.
to change in a couple of days. I know, I feel it's going to change, but when?
Right,
I'm
right.
not,
So yeah, so that might be a better question to schedule an interpretation for you and your chart.
okay,
Just because there's a lot more material to get to in this presentation.
okay.
But
I
I
just
think,
was confused because when I put in my birthday, they saying I'm Scorpio, and I'm like, but they say I'm the last of the Libras, so I'm
yeah.
confused.
Well, I think technically you are a Libra. But if you were born, like let's say if you were born late on the 22nd, like close to 11 p.m. on the 22nd, you could be very close to the cusp. And so I think you're probably a Libra. It does shift a little bit. Like
I got
it
so
shifts
you
a few
saying
hours.
I'm a Libra with Scorpio traits?
Sure. Well, yeah, you're so close to the cusp that you're a Libra who's slowly or about to transition towards Scorpio, and there's also a good chance that you have some of your personal planets in Scorpio. Mercury
Oh,
is always close by the sun, so if your sun is really close to Scorpio, Mercury could be there, or Venus
okay,
could be there, Mars could be there. Yeah.
okay. I just want that one question, and I know I gotta. I'm sorry, class.
Oh, it's okay. It's fine. No, I appreciate the questions.
Okay,
Yeah, and for anybody else, if you ask a question which is off topic, I'll probably say schedule an interpretation with me. We can talk about that more in the future. Um, yeah, so the next topic is really the new moon. So yeah, okay, so the new moon presents a day or a couple of days. So technically this is Tuesday, but we're in the orb of it. The new moon is coming soon. And so that's a time where the veils are thinner. And so what intentions do we want to introduce? What goals do we want to work on for this upcoming month? Yes, if I can just ask people to mute again, that'd be great. And yeah, so more about this time of the year. Yeah, okay, so this is a great time for slowing down. This is a great time for going within. This is a wonderful time for exploring what will I need to take advantage of these darker winter months. So once December gets here, we're going to have the shortest day, and so we have a lot of dark time to contemplate, to meditate. What do I want to introduce into my life right now, or even next year, right? Yeah. Who can I talk to? Who can I lean into for support to move toward transforming these things? What do I want to transform? What do I need to transform? And again, be gentle. don't do too much at once. And with Mars, in a little bit, we'll talk about having patience with the process. Yeah, so really dancing our shadow, walking our shadow, doing the shadow work in the winter months. So it's almost like we are preparing for that. So just to recap about Scorpio, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Scorpio can be quiet, they can be reserved, they tend to keep their emotions hidden, tucked away, and most likely with really good reason for that. And then when the Scorpios do that inner work, then they can really move towards great compassion, self-acceptance, understanding, kindness, and greater awareness. Sometimes Scorpio likes to be in control, right? So that's true about all the fixed signs. So Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus, they love to be in control. And for Scorpio, why is that? One of the reasons is Scorpio does not want to reveal their soft underbelly, right? Of course, you know, Scorpios are humans, so they have vulnerabilities, but it's hard to express those. Maybe Scorpio learned in the past that it definitely wasn't safe to, you know, let my soft emotions come out. And so over time, Scorpios hopefully will feel more comfortable allowing those vulnerabilities to surface. And with moving towards better support, more safety, yeah, more self-care. Yeah, and as I mentioned, Scorpio has the potential to be truly one of the great healers in the world. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and let's take a 10-minute break here. So I'm going to pause the recording. Okay. All right. So some of you may be familiar with this next exercise. This is actually from a system called Body Talk. So we're going to do cortices. And so cortices is plural for cortex. And in particular here, we're talking about the cortex of the brain. So different cortices of the brain. So first, just notice your breathing. Notice gravity affecting your body. So feeling your sits bones on your chair or cushion or couch or floor, wherever you're sitting. Or if you're standing, noticing your feet on the ground. And so with cortices, the first hand position, your hand will be in the back of your head, right where the head and neck come together. So you might have a couple fingers on your neck and 2 or 3 fingers on the base of your skull. So back here is we're working with brainstem, wishing brainstem well. And hold this position for 3 deep breaths. And then when you're ready, we will have you slide your hand one handprint up. So now your hand is all entirely on your head. And so you want to cover basically all of your skull going around the midline. And so my hand is here, and take 3 deep breaths in this position. And by the way, this cortices technique can be really beneficial for inviting the nervous system to settle a little bit, to calm down. If I had a really hard day, or if I got startled, or something spooked me, once I get to a quieter place, I can do cortices like this, taking 3 to 5 deep breaths with each position. And so my hand is going to slide up and around one more handprint. So now I'm near the top of my head. So I'm close to my crown. And taking 3 deep breaths here. And here we are, just wishing ourselves well, wishing our brain well. And then sliding your hand around one more hand position. So for me, I'm really close to my hairline now in the front. And 3 more deep breaths here. Wishing your nervous system well. And then when you're ready, sliding your hand down so it's entirely on your forehead. Taking 3 deep breaths here. And finally, here, we're going to use both hands. And you'll have hands on the side of your head. So my ear is right between my index finger and my thumb, like so. And taking 3 deep breaths here. If for whatever reason you only have access to one hand, you can do one side at a time. So you definitely do, right side and then left, or vice versa, if need be. So let's just take a few seconds to notice what feels different inside. We just wish the nervous system well, wish the brain well. Maybe it feels like there's a little bit more space somewhere inside, maybe with your breathing. It could be you feel a little bit more energy flow. Or perhaps you feel a tiny bit more grounded now, just noticing. Okay, so we're going to shift gears to Mars and Gemini. So we started with Scorpio. We went deep first, got the dark stuff out of the way. And so what is Mars about? And then we'll get into Gemini and the combination of the two. So Mars has to do with our energy, our activity, our drive, our willpower, energy management, our passions. How easily do we take the initiative? And how ambitious are we? You know, are we assertive? Are we even possibly at times aggressive? So classically in astrology, or maybe to keep things as simple as possible, Venus represents what we want, what we desire. And Mars shows how we go about getting what we want, right? So Mars rules Aries. Mars is stronger in the fire signs, Aries, Sagittarius, Leo. And Mars really appreciates Capricorn as well. But here we are talking about Gemini. And so what is Gemini about? So Gemini is the springtime mutable sign as spring is transitioning to summer, right? So May and June. So Gemini has to do with movement, communication. It's very versatile, adaptable. Gemini is a very fluid sign. Gemini, similar to Pisces, Gemini can be anything to anybody, right? So it's a little bit too fluid at times. So Gemini loves to mix it up with different types of people. Most Geminis will have many different types of friends from all walks of life, all skin colors, all genders, etc. So Gemini has to do with thinking. So the beginning of our mentality starts in Gemini. So it's also light and breezy in Gemini. So here today, gone tomorrow. And Gemini is where the mentality is starting to become conscious. So instead of functioning from an instinctual place, now I'm putting my thoughts and feelings and concepts into words. And when it comes to living in this world where we have a lot of duality, we have a lot of polarities, there are a lot of opposites around us, form and formless, for instance, right? And so Gemini has a lot to do with this duality and understanding and accepting opposites, being okay with opposites. Can I learn from people who are different from me, right? So these are important questions that Gemini starts to ask. In the actual sign of Gemini, it's known as the sign of the twins. So Castor and Pollux, according to the myth, one of those was the heavenly twin, and one was the earthly twin, so more of a worldly person. And so there's another duality, the earthiness versus divinity. So before we can move towards enlightenment, we have to really be able to tolerate these opposites. We have to really be able to be present with people who are different than us. And can I learn? Can I really accept you, understand you? Can I slow down enough to really hear what someone who's different from me is even saying, right? Yeah, so Gemini approaches life from, you could say, more of a left brain perspective. So you can approach Gemini easiest through logic and reason. And in that regard, Mars in Gemini tends to be more scientifically oriented. Mars in Gemini will typically show a mechanically oriented mind. Like I love to tinker, I love to dissect things, I love to take apart engines or pocket watches, like anything, take apart computers, just out of a sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder. Yeah. And so Mars and Gemini, it's hard to talk about Mars and Gemini in a vacuum, right? Because in astrology, we all have multiple aspects, multiple planets in different signs. And so if somebody does have a lot of planets in Gemini, then Mars and Gemini might accentuate a little bit of nervous tension. There can be a little bit of anxiety with Gemini sometimes. And so that's why Gemini's, one of their most important learning experiences has to do with focusing and learning to concentrate, learning a little bit of mental discipline. So can I really be present with this project? You know, Gemini can have hundreds of dreams, and Gemini can start hundreds of projects, but if I'm constantly starting a new project, am I ever going to finish one? So that's a good question for Mars and Gemini to ask. And I'm also describing earlier Mars and Gemini. You know, throughout our lives, over time, we gain experience, we learn from that experience, we develop wisdom, and hopefully we develop some good discipline as well. A little bit more about Gemini. So the sign of Gemini, which looks like the Roman numeral 2, esoterically, that sign has to do with, it's the gateway to the temple of wisdom. So Gemini, in that curiosity, in that ability to talk to anybody about anything, to approach anybody, building in a stronger mentality, a sharper focus, learning how to concentrate. Gemini is the gateway to the temple of wisdom, whereas the opposite sign, Sagittarius, often has a little bit more wisdom or like big picture. Sagittarius can concentrate a little bit easier than Gemini. And so Sagittarius loves to pursue the big philosophies of life, getting into the nuts and bolts of religions, you know, questions about God or the divinity or about different traditions. But Gemini can be right there as well. So yeah, as I mentioned, Mars and Gemini can create a very lively mind, mechanically oriented mind, lots of talents, probably pretty dexterous or agile, but that would depend on the rest of the chart. And the biggest learning for Mars and Gemini is to conserve energy. Gemini tends to scatter energy pretty easily. So Mars has to do with energy management. And over time, we learn that, you know what, I actually don't have infinite energy, and I can eventually start running low. And so using that energy wisely. And then Gemini can also say a lot of things. So if Gemini is really good at shapeshifting, if Gemini is really good at being many things to many people, then it's hard for them to know who they truly are, right? And one issue with that is Gemini can make a lot of promises. So if I say, oh yeah, I can help you move tomorrow, and then someone else is, let me see what's in the chat right here. But yeah, if somebody else asked me to do something tomorrow, oh, right. Yeah, triple Gemini, that's a challenging one. Yeah, so I might be speaking to you. But yeah, so I really need to be clear about what I'm committing to, you know, being clear about what I am. It's very easy to agree with people, right? You know, I want to make people around me happy, possibly. And so if I tell 10 people I can help them out tomorrow, I only have, 12 hours to work with. So I might have to drop the ball on half of them. And so Mars and Gemini, or people with a lot of Gemini in the chart, want to learn more concentration and more like, when is it appropriate to hold my tongue, right? So how can I keep my promises? How can I keep my word? And that's a big thing, right? And Gemini, it's light and breezy and fun and curious. But sometimes it's seen as being a little bit unreliable as a result. Yeah, so let's any questions so far about Mars, Gemini, or Mars and Gemini? Yes, Grace, please.
I thought Mars ruled Gemini.
Mercury rules Gemini.
Mercury, thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So Mercury rules Gemini, and so Mercury is the androgynous, Hermes, the winged boots, a lot of movement, a lot of activity, and Mercury was the messenger of the gods. And so likewise, Gemini is the messenger of the nervous system. Gemini is the connection between head and heart.
I think frequently Geminis, or at least in this triple Gemini's experience, were taken as insincere, but it's not intentional. It's just that we have too much ambition. And like you said, we want to be all things to all people.
Right.
And, it ends up being without locus of control, which is frenetic. So thank you for touching on those points.
Yeah, no, so that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, so Gemini, I love Gemini. It's a fantastic sign. The Geminis are the messengers of this world. So people who have a lot of movement, reporters, people who travel for work, Geminis do really well in those positions, because they love to communicate, they love to mix it up. And if you put a Gemini at a desk for 40 hours a week, they'll be miserable. Yeah, Gemini has that light, summery, late spring, summer, lightheartedness and breeziness and curiosity and sense of wonder. So it's a fantastic sign, but it's just keep in mind, Mars is the energy, right? So Mars is the engine of the chart. And so if Mars happens to fall in Gemini, then, oh yeah, I can do that. I can help you out. Yeah, I've got lots of, in the morning I wake up and I feel like I can do 20 things, but then the afternoon hits and I'm like, oh gosh, like maybe 4 or 5 were more realistic. So bringing more awareness to my process. And so that's where the Scorpio side comes in handy, right? Can I bring more introspection into inviting what is hidden to come to the surface? Right. So if I'm giving my word to a lot of people and therefore having to drop the ball pretty often, what's causing me to to keep saying yes all the time, right? So working on that might be important. Yeah. And Padma, did I see your hand was raised?
Yeah. Did you talk much about the martial energy of Mars?
We can. Yeah.
Because
So
that's usually what I think of as Mars, is that aspect of it. So it's nice to hear other things. But I also would like to hear what you have to say about the martial energy of Mars.
yeah. So what's fascinating, and thanks for mentioning that. So here we are talking about Scorpio and Mars and Gemini in this presentation, right? And so Mars starts in Aries. So our personality is born in Aries, and Mars, well, hopefully the lower self dies in Scorpio, right? So the higher self can truly be reborn in Scorpio, right? And so in reality, this entire presentation is actually involving Mars. And so on the martial side of things, right, I mean, Mars, Aries was the god of war. So mythologically, when Aries transferred to the Romans and became Mars, he became a little bit more civilized. He became a little bit more tame, a little bit more agrarian. But even still, the god of war we're talking about. So yeah, so Mars has to do with conflict. Mars has to do with, so if I have a lot of unresolved stuff in me, that can lead to some Martian destructiveness, burning bridges, saying no is one thing, but if I say no to everything my boss wants me to do, I'm probably gonna get fired. And so Mars, an overactive and certainly unconscious Mars can lead to a lot of bridges being burned. Like, I don't know why I keep losing friendships. I don't know why I keep losing jobs. I can't keep the stuff together. Look at Mars for sure, and also look at Scorpio. But yeah, and so Mars can fight. So Venus likes to attract things with grace and harmony and aesthetics, but Mars is like, nope, I'm going to go out and get what I want right now, right? And so it can be aggressive, it can be assertive, it can be combative, but hopefully the beauty of the work that I do with somatic experiencing, so I learned this particular piece a few years ago. Anger is one of the easiest emotions to transform into life force and vitality. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. If you're working with a good practitioner, it might take 5 or 10 sessions, but it can happen. And so like anger and the Martian force can really become that more solar vitality. It can become healthy constitution, right? Yeah, and so what's interesting is Mars rules Aries, right? So the sign of Aries. And so Aries loves contact too, just like its opposite sign of Libra. Libra loves contact through relationships and harmony, and because it's ruled by Venus, so Libra loves gracefulness and things to be symmetrical and really, really beautiful aesthetic. Mars and Aries, they would gladly get in a fight to have contact with somebody because it's still contact, right? Now if it's healthy, if it's secure attachment, if it's brotherly love, a lot of guys wrestle around as a form of contact, and that can be very, very healthy. A lot of boys may have wanted that from their dads and they may not have gotten it. But so yeah, so the contact that Mars desires is much different than Venus, but it's still there, right? So people who are very Martian, they can be martial artists or fighters or soldiers or firefighters, that big, intense combating the flames, as it were. But yeah, so Padma, does that speak to that question?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Oh,
Perfect.
great. Yeah, and one more. Grace, did you have one more comment or question?
Question, please. Can you touch on, I realize at the root, they're often marshaled by the same force, but I think many of the people listening probably wrestle with fear as much as they do anger. And I find fear at the root of most of my anger. Can you touch on that in the context of Mars and Gemini, please? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's quite a question. Great question. Yeah. So I'll just brush on this, and we don't want to go too deep here, but anger can be, so what's psychologically, anger is actually a secondary emotion. So what does that mean? So a lot of people have anger as a defense against vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Like how many people, or how many parents, usually fathers, but how many parents rage out instead of saying that really hurt, instead of saying I'm really sad right now, they get angry instead, right? And so that's a very common defense. That's a very common stance that people take. And if I go into big anger, then I don't have to feel that fear and that vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Yeah, I mean, typically fear is usually more Saturn's domain. So Saturn has to do with caution and limitation and restriction, and let's play it safe. Let's double check things. Did you check the plan this morning? And so Saturn has more to do with fear than Mars or Gemini, really. Yeah, I mean, socially, Gemini is fearless. you know, typically, but this is where the rest of the chart comes in handy. So you have to know the whole chart. If somebody has a really strong Saturn in a very Gemini filled chart, there still might be some fear underneath that curiosity or underneath that sense of wonder. Yeah, so what else about that? Yeah, so Mars, Mars is typically the gas, like the accelerator, right? So Saturn is the brakes. Saturn's the fear, the caution, the safety. Mars is like, oh no, let's take this risk. Let's go, let's do it. And you know, I mean, like the soldiers, like someone who's very Martian, they might be the first one over the hill into the battle. Yeah, so fear, typically more Saturn, and then if that blends with Neptune or Pluto, then it gets even more complicated. Yeah, I think for now we'll keep this lighter as we're talking about Gemini. Okay, yeah, thanks. Let me just, so we'll slide on to we'll go to the next slide here. Let's see what's next. Okay. So yeah, so that was Mars in retrograde. A little bit about Mars in retrograde regarding people who might have Mars in Gemini in their natal chart, or yeah, I mean more personalized Mars in Gemini. So let's chat a little bit about Mars retrograde. And this is very important. Mars is one of the only planets that does its own thing as far as retrograde. So because the planet Mars basically has a 2-year cycle around the sun. I mean, it's like 700 days, but it's just under 700 days. But so it's really close to 2 years. And so Mars mirrors the Earth in some ways. And so therefore, the retrograde cycle of Mars doesn't happen every year, because there's some times where the Earth is pretty close to Mars, and we can see it moving forward from our perspective quite well. And let me just backtrack for a second. I'll talk just a little bit about retrograde in general. So when I talk about a planet being retrograde, the planet is constantly moving forward. So the planets are not stopping and then turning to go backwards for a few weeks or a few months. What's happening is, from our perspective here on Earth, and with the backdrop of the zodiac and the stars behind Mars, when the Earth zooms by Mars in the near orbit, from our perspective, it looks like Mars is temporarily going backwards through the sign, in this case, the sign of Gemini. So it's kind of similar to if you've ever been driving on a highway, and let's say you're going 75 miles an hour and you pass somebody who's going 55. If you're a passenger in the faster car, as you pass that car, from a certain perspective, it could look like that car is going backwards, right? And when you're in front of that car, if you turn and look out the back window at that car that's behind you, that's just going 55, it could look like it's moving away from you, right? When in reality, we just know it's slower than you are. And so that's what's happening here with the retrograde planets. All of the planets go retrograde. The sun and moon do not count, because those are the great lights, or the great light and the lesser light. But Mercury, Venus, Mars, and all the outer planets do go retrograde. However, the outer planets have more of a seasonal, like they go retrograde every year. So it's like our body gets used to Jupiter retrograde. Our body gets used to Pluto retrograde. Our nervous system gets used to Saturn retrograde. Mars, on the other hand, it'll go for close to 2 years without being retrograde. So that's what we're experiencing right now. The last time Mars was retrograde was like 23 months ago. And so Mars is turning to go retrograde really this week. I mean, technically it happens October 30th, but Mars is not moving forward much at all over these next few days. And it really hasn't been over the past few weeks. And so what does that mean? So Mars retrograde. So Mars is the planet of drive, energy, willpower, and energy management. That's the key word here, is energy management. And also what happens, so as the Earth is zooming between Mars and the Sun, as we come close to Mars and we're also between the Sun and Mars, there's an opposition. So it looks like, from our perspective, the Sun is opposite Mars. So every time Mars is retrograde, there's always a Mars-Sun opposition. So that's in the mix here too. And so Mars retrograde, let me turn to those notes, is a time of really being, can I make some time and space for stuff which is under the surface to come out? So we just talked about some of the challenging side of Mars can be anger or aggression or resentment, or if the anger turns sideways, it can become passive aggression, it can become envy, it can become resentment. And this could all be this could all be on the table as we talk about Mars retrograde. So it's a time where stuff which is buried deep can come to the surface. And if we don't allow that to happen, if we don't surrender to the process and we try to pretend like everything's fine, and well, last month I could easily accomplish 20, 30 things in a given day. If we try to keep up with that pace, wherever Mars is going retrograde in your chart, so whichever house it's retrograde in, that area of your life could seem a little ill-fated, or you might think that, why am I having bad luck this month? Most people I talk to are just grumpy or irritable or ornery or resentful. And that's possible. It's possible you're having some bad luck. However, as an astrologer, I tend to look a little below the surface. And so if that starts happening for you, the bad luck thing, or things are just a little bit grittier today. Why are people so irritated around me? And that could easily be their stuff, right? Mars is retrograde for them too, but probably in a different part of their chart. And so can I take some time to be with what needs to clear, what needs to process? And again, being gentle, going slow. We don't want to do everything all at once. That's not going to lead to any kind of ordered organization. So I mentioned Mars retrograde always involves the Sun. So because from the Earth's perspective, the Sun will be in Sagittarius in a month or in about 5 weeks. And Mars is retrograde in Gemini. So there will be that opposition between Gemini and Sagittarius, between Sun and Mars. So Mars retrograde is an ambassador to the Sun. So Mars has to do with this like masculine principle. I mean, it doesn't have to be masculine, right? But it's not gendered. But Mars is this yang principle of assertion, movement, activity, getting what I want, going out and pursuing what I want, right? What I desire. And so likewise, can Mars become more refined? Can it become more civilized and more like the Sun, more solar, more vital, more patient? So it really has to do with externalizing these inner thoughts, these inner drives, these inner desires, right? So the Latin word animus means spirit, typically, because if something's inanimate, it's without a spirit, right? However, I've heard that animus, the Latin word animus, used in the right context, can also mean anger. It can also mean aliveness. It can also mean vitality. So it's, when Latin was a living language, I'm sure it had a lot more metaphor than it has today. And so, someone who's very spirited, that horse is very spirited, right? It might be angry. And so this is a time to allow some jealousy or a little bit of anger, a little bit of resentment, a little bit of rivalry to come to the surface. Can I lean into support? Is there a meditation teacher I can talk to, a mentor, a religious figure I can talk to, a counselor, a therapist, to work through some of this stuff? So if something is suppressed, the next 2 months, it may come to the surface, and if we try to keep pushing through and we don't give it time, it may come to the surface unconsciously, and that's where things get a little bit sticky, tricky. So Mars in the chart, no matter where it is, Mars demands attention. It demands recognition, right? And so when things are retrograde, especially when Mars is retrograde, then the stuff which is under the surface is starting to demand more attention. So this is where energy management comes in handy. If I have a huge project going on right now, and what's interesting, there's a little bit of illusion of success happening right now. So Mars has been in Gemini for basically 2 months now, right? As it slows down to go retrograde back through the same sign, the same degrees of Gemini. So the sun has been in Libra. And so when the sun was in Libra, it made a trine to Mars. There's always a sun trine Mars before Mars goes retrograde. And so that's an illusion of energy. That's an illusion of, oh yeah, I am making good progress on these dreams, these hopes, these goals, these ideas I've got. And then Mars goes retrograde 2 or 3 weeks later, and it's like, what happened? Like the bottom could drop out a little bit. So just be aware of that. If you've had a lot of success over these last 2 or 3 weeks, just slow your roll a little bit. Can I press pause if need be? Can I introduce some spaciousness here? Because if Mars is moving through that area of your chart, if it's moving through that house in your chart that has to do with that particular project, you may not have a choice. You might have to press pause anyway. Something may come up, and if I keep pushing really hard, and if I'm burnt out going into Mars retrograde, guess what? It's not going to get any better for the next 2 months. So really being honest about your capacity right now. What can I handle? What can I take on? And especially right now, what, if anything, can I say yes to? And the answer, it doesn't have to be much, right? Because the idea is maybe I need to say no to a few more things right now. Because so Mars is turning retrograde in a week, but it's not moving forward. It's moving forward just a sliver of a degree over the next 7 days. And so we're basically in Mars retrograde right now in a way, because Mars is stationing to go retrograde. Yeah, and so a little bit more about Mars retrograde. Yeah, and to go with that Scorpio piece from earlier, this would be a time where could I allow some of those vulnerabilities to come to the surface? If I notice in myself, wow, I get really angry, but I don't feel sadness. I don't give myself time or space to grieve. I don't allow my soft underbelly to ever show. Maybe I grew up in a really tough neighborhood, whatever the case may be, right? This might be the time. Can I find someone who I trust? Can I find someone who I feel pretty safe with to work through some of this stuff? Yeah. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes remaining. I'm just seeing if there's anything else to mention. Yeah. So the key words for working with Mars retrograde is, can I be objective? Can I bring some maturity to my process? can I learn from my experience? So Mars was retrograde 2 years ago. So 26 months ago, Mars went retrograde. And Mars is always retrograde for approximately 2 months, a little bit longer. And yeah, so can I learn from my experience? And can I really temper my enthusiasm? I mean, we don't want to just be, you know, like dull and blank. But if I get super excited about something over these next few weeks, it may not last, right? So just you know, okay, so Mars is retrograde. Can I count to 10 before saying something? Can I count to 10 before saying yes? Can I give this a few days? Like someone asked me to do something. Well, let me think about that. You know, I've got a lot on my plate right now. Let me get back to you in a day or two, right? Or heck, 3 to 5 days. Really feeling into it. Yeah. And so the nice thing about that Mars trine, so we just had Sun trine Mars a week ago or so, and so that's the initial, that's what always happens before Mars retrograde. It's a little deception of yeah, I've got a lot of energy, I'm having some success with these projects or goals or ideas, etc. And then we get the Mars trine the Sun after Mars is done being retrograde. So in a few months, when the Sun enters Aquarius, so that's the end of January. Yeah. So at the end of January, we get another Mars trine, and then we can definitely pick up if we had to press pause, if we had to hit the brakes, if we had to slow down on these projects or ambitions, then we can pick them up full steam in January. Yeah. Okay. So with 5 minutes remaining, yeah, we didn't get to Mars Neptune, so don't worry about that. There's already a lot we can talk about from these past few topics. Any questions going forward? Final questions? There can certainly be a lot of positivity to Mars retrograde. If you have a lot of awareness, if you do some efficacious spiritual practice, and that might look like walking in the woods, right? It might be qigong. It doesn't have to be sitting on a meditation cushion. It might be exercising. It might be swimming. It might be dancing, listening to music. But if you have that introspection time, if you have that contemplative time, then maybe you've already done some of that inner work, and Mars retrograde can be easier for you. There can be a lot of great insights that come up with Mars retrograde, but it might be a time of really, you know, saying, can I truly take on what I've said yes to these past 3 weeks? Because that would have encountered that Sun Mars trine from last week. So yeah, so it's, you know, retrograde is not a bad thing per se, but if we use it wisely, there's a lot of insights that can come out of it. And noticing if there's resistance, right? Noticing if there's this if the swampy waters are coming to the surface, hopefully you can make some time and space for that. Yeah, Grace.
So it ends up, I personally, it makes me feel like the hung man in Tarot, like I'm just suspended. You know, I feel what you're speaking of energetically a lot. So thank you for kind of validating that, because I was like, oh my God, you know, what's going on? I was a mad gardener 2 months ago, and now it's like all I can do to go out and pick up a little bit of dead material. So how does one avoid self-punishment or self-flagellation because of this energy? So efficacious spiritual practice, right?
Right. Well, actually, I mean, so if you're talking about some shame coming into the process, yeah, so we can really be gentle with ourselves, right? So life happens. There's always ups and downs. So, you know, it's like the moon, the tides. The moon sometimes is full and we can get a lot done. I feel really energetic. I can't sleep for some reason. but then the moon is new and it's waning. And so that's true about our energy levels as well, especially if the moon is pertinent in your chart. But you know, the same can be said about Mars, same can be said about Mercury. There's going to be an ebbing and a flowing, and yeah, so hopefully you can do some kindness practice. So you know, metta kindness practice that's a very potent spiritual practice. It doesn't have to look like that, but if you know, if you're noticing some self-flagellation, as you mentioned, you know, hopefully you can get some support. Work with somebody who knows how to skillfully be with shame and to acknowledge it and to process it and to make it more tolerable. Yeah, yeah. And it's just shame. Yeah, yeah. So you might so Grace, you might think of, if you can take a few minutes. So like, you know, so yeah, so 2 months ago, I was out in the garden, I was going crazy. You know, I planted everything. It was amazing. It was fantastic. I was harvesting, it was beautiful flowers. And then today, why don't I have that energy, right? So it's really easy for me to be hard on myself about that. Like what's wrong with me, right? So if you can take a few minutes and notice, is there a part of my body that's showing up with that tension? So where is that rigidity inside? So then you might, so Grace, this is particular for you. So this is personalized for you. Then you might say, my shoulders are tense, but I am not. My stomach feels tense, but I do not. So you put some distance there. Yeah, yeah. My stomach feels nervous, but I do not. Yeah, any other questions about anything? So 1 or 2 more questions. We almost time to wrap up. Anything else? Well, so we are planning to do, I say we, hopefully we'll get our timing correct, Emily and I. So we're planning to do a new moon workshop every month. So in November, we'll be talking about the Sagittarius new moon, I think. But it's possible this new moon is happening so early in November. I need to check and see if we have a blue moon happening here. But the next new moon will most likely be about Sagittarius. And then we'll choose a different planet to cover. So today was a lot about Mars. Yeah, so next month will be Sagittarius, and we'll see. To be announced. But yeah, so follow us. We're about to start posting more on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. So my site on Facebook is Wisdom Healing Arts. So that's my LLC that has trauma-informed astrology under it. And yeah, so let us know if you want a personal, you know, an interpretation to look at your chart, see what's going on for you. And thank you so much for being here. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Wanda. Great to talk. Yep.
Same here.
Thanks. Okay, good to see you all. Take care.